Rogers. Okay. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. We'll make a start for this session here now. So I'd like to welcome you all to this second day of the European Conference on Results from Road Transport Research in Horizon 2020 projects. I'm your moderator for this session, Yannick Busse, from the European Climate, Infrastructure and Environment Executive Agency. I'm here also with my co-moderator, Ingrid Skogsmo, from VTI in Gothenburg, Sweden. And the title for this session at the moment here is Inclusive Transport Systems to Meet the User Needs. Now, for this session, we will discuss the need for accessible, affordable, and fair mobility for users of transport systems. What we have seen is that connectivity has increased throughout Europe. However, transport systems remain not sufficiently accessible for those with low IT literacy, people with disabilities or reduced mobility, and it can also be too expensive for those with low disposable incomes. Now, mobility is also something that is critical and a critical aspect for social inclusion, and is also an important determinant for human well-being, especially from those from disadvantaged groups. Mobility fulfills a basic need in enabling citizens to integrate into society and also integration into the labor market. And the shift towards sustainable, smart, resilient transport systems should be a shift for all users, and it should be fair and also a just shift. And if we leave those behind, we risk it not taking place at all. So we have with us here this morning and today three speakers from very accomplished projects who will address these topics and will be speaking on behalf of the Indimo, Dignity and TRIPS projects. So we can move to our first presentation. Imre Keseru is an assistant professor of urban mobility and operational director at Mobi Mobility, Logistics and Automotive Transport Technology Research Center at the Vrije Universiteit Brussels. In his previous position, he developed policies for international transport at the Hungarian Ministry of Transport and was deputy head of unit at the Institute of Transport Sciences in Budapest. His main research themes include participatory evaluation of urban mobility projects, stakeholder involvement in transport planning, inclusive and accessible transport, and participatory transport foresight. Imre, over to you.
Thank you very much. I can do that, okay?
Okay.
It is not that way, actually.
Thank you. So good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for the introduction. So indeed, I'm representing here today the Indimo project. When you came here today or yesterday or before planning your trip, I guess many of you just took your mobile phones and typed in the address or the name of the conference center, and almost immediately in a few seconds you received some recommendations on how to come here, which mode of transport to take, where to get off the tram or the bus, or maybe you even bought your tickets through your phones or booked your parking spots. Well, this seems to be a very automatic movement for many of us, and we are enjoying the benefits of digital mobility solutions. But this is not that obvious for many millions of people all across Europe. And the numbers speak for themselves. 35 million people living in the European Union never used the internet. and 44% of the population of the European Union have not even basic digital skills. And if we look at the different age categories, for example, these numbers actually go up. So almost 70% of retired people have no basic digital skills, and also close to 50% of people living in rural areas in the European Union also lack any basic digital skills. So this was the motivation and starting point for our project, INDIMO. INDIMO stands for Inclusive Digital Mobility Solutions. This is a Horizon 2020 funded project, a 3-year project, and we are now in the 3rd year. We started just like the other 2 projects right before Corona. And the project is coordinated by the Free University of Brussels, and we have 14 other partners representing research institutes, NGOs representing vulnerable people, but also startups, operators and developers of digital mobility solutions. The project has 5 main objectives. First of all, we wanted to improve our understanding of the needs of vulnerable population groups about using digital mobility and delivery solutions. And maybe one unique aspect of the project is that we are not only looking at personal mobility, so car sharing, ride sharing solutions, but we also look at delivery and logistics solutions, for example, smart delivery boxes, but also deliveries, healthy deliveries of food to vulnerable population groups. The second objective is to improve our knowledge about the requirements of the users towards digital tools. And our project is based on the concept of co-creating tools that can help engineers, developers, operators, but also policymakers to make digital mobility solutions more accessible and inclusive. For this, we foster the ideas of universal design throughout the project, which means that we want to make all digital solutions accessible to all groups of population. So not designing specific and niche solutions for people with different types of disabilities, but making just one solution which is suitable for all people. And finally, of course, we would also like to influence future policy through our guidelines and tools at the European, regional, and local level. Our methodology, as I said, is based on the concept of universal design, and we built our project on the 7 principles of universal design, which mostly relate to accessibility to the interfaces and digital tools. But we complement these 7 principles of universal design with 2 important aspects, and that is social and spatial and economic equity. So also making these solutions affordable for people, and also spatially making it accessible, because you might live in an area where actually there are no digital mobility solutions, so you are automatically left out of the benefits. And also, we are focusing on security and privacy, because through our research, we noticed that vulnerable people are more prone to be exposed to cybersecurity attacks, and also there is a huge barrier to using digital tools due to the fear of loss of data and privacy. We have identified 4 target groups. First of all, the operators and developers of various digital mobility solutions like car sharing, ride sharing applications, delivery services. And we would like to help them to design and operate more inclusive services through guidelines. We also have policymakers on board, because policymakers, especially at the local level, very often faced with the question when a new operator comes to the city, like an e-scooter operator, is that service going to be actually inclusive and accessible to all of the population, or only for young people who have a credit card and also money on their account? And finally, one of our main target groups is, of course, citizens, and I intentionally don't say users because we also focus on the non-users of digital mobility tools. We also wanted to know why people do not use digital mobility solutions. So in the first part of the project, in the first year, we have done quite a bit of research, mostly qualitative research through case studies, 70 interviews with users and non-users, more than 80 interviews with stakeholders to explore what the needs of the stakeholders and the users are towards digital mobility solutions. And based on this research, we created 6 personas and also 6 journey maps. And the main conclusions of this first stage was that technology always has to be accompanied by a friendly interface, and also vulnerable people always need some kind of an assistance. So even if everything is digitalized, we still need human assistance, human contact, which can be either a personal contact or through the phone, or, for example, through chat messages. Also, it became obvious that data security and privacy are clearly barriers for vulnerable people to use digital mobility services. And currently, they receive an overload of information about GDPR and also privacy declarations that they don't understand. What is also important, that all digital solutions somehow link to physical transport, mobility, delivery solutions. So anything you book online, in the end, it will become a physical service. So it's very important that we look at these services from both points of view, from the digital, but also from the physical design point of view. And in the end, what we want to achieve is a highly useful, very secure experience and a very good user experience using these digital services. At the moment, we are developing and revising our main outputs, which will be compiled in the Digital Mobility Toolbox, which is comprised of 4 tools. The first one is the Universal Design Manual for Digital Transport Services. This is aimed at developers and operators, providing detailed guidelines on how to make new and existing services more inclusive and accessible. Very much linked to this, we also produced guidelines for a universal interface language, which specifically focuses on the interfaces like mobile interfaces or screen interfaces, and also the icons that are used in mobile applications. Then the third part of the toolbox is the cybersecurity and privacy assessment and guidelines. And finally, all these 3 tools will come together in a policy evaluation tool, which will be an online tool, a sort of checklist that policymakers can use when, for example, a new service comes to the city to check if this service complies with the minimum accessibility and inclusiveness requirements that we set up. But also it will give advice on how to improve inclusiveness of the services. So let's just see a couple of highlights from these documents. Of course, during this very short presentation, I will not be able to really go into details here, but you can already find the first versions of these documents on the website of Indimo. So the Universal Design Manual will help the designers of user interfaces, but also the operators of mobility services, graphic designers, to really look into the details of how to make their interfaces, the applications, but also the actual services more inclusive and accessible. And we identified 10 vulnerable groups, and we give specific recommendations and a checklist on how to make the services better. The main points, some of the main points from these guidelines are that what is very important for the users is to consider space. So it's not only clicking a button, but there is also always a movement involved. People want to go from A to B, so they need to have a good understanding of how they can move around in space, and digital tools needs to give this assistance. The second one is the importance of time. For most vulnerable people, time is a valuable resource, so it's important that we give a good and real-time estimation of, for example, waiting times or delivery times. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, human contact is really crucial for vulnerable groups to assist them when they are stuck, for example, in the booking process or the purchase process of train tickets. Then we also tested in the universal interface, in the process of making the universal interface language, how understandable and clear the icons are that are used in different applications. And such basic icons, like the house or this wheel or the star, they can have very different meanings in the different applications and also to different types of people. So our conclusion was that currently there is not really a clear understanding of these icons, and also in multiple applications, multiple different icons are used for the same purpose or to indicate the same action. That's why it is very important to improve the recognizability of icons, the usability of these interfaces, and by the end of the day, to reduce the frustration that vulnerable people feel when trying to deal with digital interfaces and design these interfaces for everyone, not only for young people and highly educated people. In the third guidelines, we dealt with cybersecurity and privacy. Here, what is very important to develop already from the very beginning, a trust in the user and trustworthiness of the applications. Here we think that trainings can help to train the end users to increase trust and the perception of security. And also what is very important, that we have transparency in terms of the data protection and also on how GDPR, for example, is presented in the applications. We have created the first versions of these guidelines, and these are being now tested in 5 pilot projects. In these pilot projects, we redesign existing applications or design new digital mobility applications based on the first versions of the guidelines in order to be able to update the guidelines based on the needs of the designers, the operators, the policymakers, and also the users. The 5 pilots represent very different types of transport services, and each of them addresses specific vulnerable groups. We have pilots in Antwerp, Berlin, in Emilia-Romagna in Italy, in Galilee in Israel, and also in Madrid in Spain. So just a few highlights of what is happening in the pilots. Recently in Emilia-Romagna, in our first pilot, we installed a smart delivery box to enable e-commerce in a rural area. It's a small village where such a service has not been available. And we focus on older people and also migrants with limited knowledge of the language to enable them to use this service to have, for example, packages delivered to this box, which is now located at the City Hall. In our second pilot in Antwerp, we are working with people with visual impairments. And we have designed a smartphone application which can help them to cross traffic light when they cannot see the light itself or that cannot hear the noise. In the third pilot, we focus on healthy deliveries of food to vulnerable people in Madrid through an online application. In Berlin, we are working with Door-to-Door, a startup on a ride-sharing application in which we designed a safety button. If the passengers feel unsafe, they can press this button to get help. And finally, in Israel, we are working on an application to help women living in ethnic towns to get around the area in ride-sharing vehicles when public transport is not available. So to conclude, what impact do we expect from the project? And we expect that the first universal design manual for digital mobility services will be created and widely available. And the InDemo toolkit will be used by policymakers to make these services better and give advice. And we also bring in the gender perspective, for example, in this design process. And we are collaborating with our sister projects, which will be presented here today, Dignity and TRIPS, but also other Horizon-funded projects like Sprout, and also a JPI-funded project, Smart Hubs, where we are going to apply our tools on specific digital solutions like an autonomous shuttle in Sprout and digital information pillars in the Smart Hubs projects. Thank you very much for the attention. Please visit our website for more information and
And then just click on the project itself with the mouse.
Thank you very much, Imre. Okay, we move on now to our next project, which is Dignity, and our next speaker, which is Els van den Broek. Els has a master's degree in environmental engineering sciences and anthropology. She joined Mobile 21 in 2012 with more than 8 years of international policy experience as a climate change policy advisor for the Flemish Ministry of Environment. She started with a pioneering action-oriented research on mobility poverty in Flanders. From then on, the challenges of transport equity and the impact of mobility on social inclusion became the core of her research and policy work. Since 2020, she's also the Director General of Mobile 21, together with Jan Christians. Els, over to you for our next project.
Sorry about this.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the nice introduction of Yannick as well as from Ime, because it sets very well why we are here in this room today, why we are working on this project. I have to disappoint you because I'm not Sylvia. I'm not the project coordinator of this project. She has COVID, so she asked me to replace her, and I will do my best to tell you everything about her project. Mobile 21 is a very enthusiastic partner in this project, so I hope that turns out well. It's an honor to be here, and it's important too, and I hope I won't disappoint you in the next few minutes when talking about the project. And thank you for being here. As Imre said, social inclusion related to mobility, it's a challenge. It's a challenge in all our societies. And although the program of this conference is quite technological and technical, I'm very happy that you are here because mobility will be sustainable if it's fair and just. As Yannick said, it won't be sustainable. So we really have to work all together on this. And I think the three sister projects are doing their utmost best to give you inspiration, give you advice, give you methodologies, manuals, toolboxes, and then for next step to make it just and fair for everybody. We are convinced that mobility is like a human right, the freedom to get from A to B. And thank you to the Commission to start these three sister projects. You will see that I will tell a little bit that what Imre already mentioned, and I'm sure that Ali will repeat maybe some things too, but the challenges are that high that it's important that we do very evidence-based, action-oriented research on this topic. So we are like the other two, very happy with this call from 2019. We are working very hard to end up in this year. And we are 6 research partners that you see here. So Isinova as a coordinator, and then Mobile 21, BUAS in the Netherlands, UPC in Barcelona, ICT from Berlin, and the University of Cambridge in UK. that are really working on this research, on this topic, and that are very grateful to have 4 pilots and 8 partners within these pilots that are there to test our research, to test the guidelines that we develop, and to give feedback to us to make them even better, to improve them, to fine-tune them, and to make something that can be useful for the upcoming years as to make our mobility system more sustainable. You can see them there. We have the Barcelona metropolitan region as a pilot, the municipality of Ancona. We are working in the Flanders region and also in the city of Tilburg. As said, this is why we are doing this project, as Indimo is doing and as TRIPS is doing. The digital gap is there. It's even growing, widening, as I can say like that. And this has an enormous impact of so many vulnerable groups in our society. I cannot repeat it enough because we're not, as we here in this room, I don't think we can realize what the impact is on being not that digital skilled. And so we're looking for, from a user perspective, that's really our emphasis, to see how we can make things better, how we can make systems more accessible, more affordable, and more user-friendly. I'm gonna turn the space. Our objective is to build an approach, a research approach based that focuses on 3 levels that are needed to collaborate. You see there the macro level, which is institutional framework, policymakers, you and I. The meso level, working on the products and the services, the providers, as Imre called them. And of course, then the people where we're doing it for, the micro level. And so we're building an approach that, with these 3 levels, works towards working together. We'll help them in a 3-step approach to get to better solutions and services. We call it a framing phase, where you are to frame the gap, the problem, how big is it, for whom, and where is it, especially where we can improve. A bridging phase is where we have to look for better solutions together with policymakers, with providers, with the people themselves. And of course, then we have to evaluate to see if we are really getting a better, more inclusive solutions. So that's our approach, and I think if you listened well to Imre, of course there are similarities, which is a good thing, I think, and which is why we have a lot of contact in between the projects to enrich and empower ourselves. Within these 3 phases, what we in fact did with the research team was accommodating, make existing methodologies custom-made for this challenge. So customer journey mapping, digital GIP self-assessment, workshops, it's not new. Focus group, they're not new, but we try to develop guidelines that are appropriate for this specific challenge and to look for the right answers. We did for the framing phase. We developed as well the same approach for the bridging phase with the inclusive design wheel as a method and scenario building as a methodology. And we will do the same for the evaluation phase with these 2 methodologies. And as I said, the pilots are in the heart of our research because they're our validation. They have to test, to say yes or no, to say this can be better, etc. So we are very happy. We had our first, I said, live workshop 2 weeks ago. It was really great and amazing how interactive it was, how enthusiastic people were to exchange, to learn, to say this is okay, these are lessons learned, these are still pending topics, we still have to do our research further on because we're also also committed to the topic. So this is our approach. But of course, before you can frame, you have to understand the problem very well and how we did that, or we tried. Besides some literature review, we had 5 big surveys in the partner countries, representative surveys. It was a survey led by the University of Cambridge to see how people how the use of digital projects and services across Europe how the capabilities of people are the abilities, the competences, etc. So you see where they write a huge amount of data they're collected there in this 5 minutes, which are well described in a very nice deliverable on our website. I do invite you to check because it's a unique document with very detailed information on people competences in these 5 countries, but also cross-sectional on how they are not only just with an access of internet, but also how can you, like Imre said, if you have to change something in an interface, can you do that? And there were really striking results. For example, just the competence of using a digital interface can be very low, till 33% in Italy. I mean, that's 1 on 3 that's not competent to just use a simple digital interface. So we have a long road and a lot of challenges, opportunities, let's call them, to improve our digital mobility systems. So that's the survey. And we also had a first check of good examples of mobility products, existing ones that are like developed for vulnerable groups, which is not our preferred option. It should be inclusive for all, so the same for all. But of course, we can learn from these specific products. What are the key success factors? Why are they working? And so based on interviews, reviews, etc., we have this catalog ready with 32 examples that can learn, of course, for the future. We learn us a lot for the future. When you understand better, you can start framing. As I told you, in each phase of our dignity approach, we have 3 levels: the meso service level, the end user micro level, and the policy micro level. And we wanted to map, as much as possible this digital gap. We used, and the pilots didn't like it a lot, a huge Excel trying to gather as much data as possible, but it was a try, because if you don't find some kind of data, that's also a sign. You can also learn from that. It was mostly quantitative information based on existing documents, interviews, etc. But was really useful for the pilots was to add on some qualitative approaches, so the customer journey mapping and the focus groups that we, made custom-made on this topic, learned them a lot on how users, specific vulnerable groups, experience the digital gap when during their journey, when booking or going on the way. So this was proven really a very nice add-on for the pilots. And we ended up this framing phase, and the overall results for the 4 pilots you can find here on the screen. So it gives us an insight for the 3 levels, what specific things we know, who we have to target, which policy documents can be used as a leverage. For example, you see here, there is a policy officer on diversity. He has to be included. I mean, this is not only about mobility. It's about people from diversity, social welfare, IT. So many partners, so many stakeholders have to be included. And so we made up a kind of map for this pilot at the end of the framing phase. From framing, we went to bridging because we're positive and future-looking. And there we had 2 methodologies developed on the macro level, so on the policy level. ICT from Berlin helped us through a scenario building approach. So all the pilots went through these steps with 3 different workshops to get some kind of scenarios, most likely, not likely to happen, but we could learn from this scenario building process how we could take further steps. And all the guidelines, as you see there, are available to use, to check, to read for you as well. So we had this scenario building approach, but also the inclusive design wheel approach. That's really an iterative. I will show you. There is a wheel again. We like wheels, because it invites us to rethink what we did. But it's a proven methodology from Cambridge as well, with the explore, create, and evaluate phase. It's like a bit like the universal design, but it's a methodology to structure your thinking and to look for solutions that are accessible for all. So also this design wheel was tested and evaluated by all the pilots, which gave us for the inclusive design wheel, as specifically this kind of information. So they all had one partner to organize this process. They had one focus. So as you see in each pilot, we had a different digital service that was part of the inclusive design wheel process. The carpooling app, I was curious how you did that, because we left that out because of COVID and we went to an on-demand transport app. There was a mass application in the Flemish region that was key to the process. In Tilburg, it was a bike sharing system, and in Ancona, it was a journey mapping app. So 4 different services that went through the whole process of scenario building and of inclusive design wheel to learn specifically for one part of, or one specific target group. So this is where we got from the bridging phase in the project. And so we're up to the next, to the evaluation part, which is really to evaluate the potential on a research level of the combination of all these methodologies, framing ones, bridging ones, on the 3 levels, to say where do we get now? How can we make really future-proofed long-term strategies that are inclusive for a digital mobility system? So that's to validate the approach and to get conclusions for the project, but of course for the policymakers and the service provider that we would like to help out in this idea. It's about the decision support team, a toolkit, as well, where all our findings are available, and some policy recommendations. We learned a lot from the pilots that are also applicable for others, and we learned a lot also from the pilot partners, the providers and the bike sharing providers that are also with another view in the project. And I think this is where we really want to get to with Dignity, is to create awareness, first of all, about the challenge, and then to see how many stakeholders do we have to involve and how do we involve them in this process to get to this inclusive digital system for all. Because again, if it's not inclusive, it's not sustainable, and that's not what we are aiming for. Thank you.
Okay, we move now to our next speaker, our next project, which is the TRIPS project. This will be presented by Tali Hatsikis, is a senior research analyst at Trilateral Research. She is the deputy project manager of the TRIPS project, coordinating research and innovation in designing open innovation processes for disabled users for applications in transport and mobility. Tali's consultancy work covers a broad spectrum of topics on socio-technical innovations, the ethical human rights challenges of artificial intelligence and big data analytics, foresight, scenario planning, and strategic analysis, enterprise architecture, and business case development. Her consultancy practice is dedicated to understanding effective communication of the bigger picture that contributes strategically to the needs of the client's business model. Tali, over to you.
Just before I start my presentation, I would like you to think about the following question. How many disabled people there are across Europe? Guess a number. Yes. 135 million people are registered disabled users in the European Union right now. That doesn't mean that there are not other people that have some sort of impairment, but these are the registered people that, you know, get the benefits. So we are talking about a big chunk of the population, and that number excludes the elderly who might be facing some sort of impairment. I want to tell you a little bit about the motivation for when the idea for the TRIPS project was created. It was created one night. I was coming back from the tube in London, and I bumped into that person on the door late at night and almost kind of hit her over. So I realized that she was blind, but she didn't carry her stick with her. Anyway, I helped her, I apologized, and I also asked her why she's not carrying her stick with her. And the answer was that if I carry my stick, people know that I'm blind, and they harass me on the tube. So she'd rather not have her cane with her as opposed to face our lousy attitudes towards disabled people during transport. And so this is how a business person said, I need to tackle that social issue. Anyway, what is the TRIPS? Who is the TRIPS project? Well, the TRIPS consortium is 11 partners, comprising, okay. So one of them is ANIL, the European Network of Independent Living. This is a disability NGO across Europe that they have this motto, nothing for us without us. They want to be involved in developing the solutions that for themselves. It's also the UITP, which most of you should know. It's the Association of Transport Operators, very core partner. And also AAAT, which is the Association of Assistive Technologies, because we thought these three areas need to collaborate and see what we can, how we can best develop solutions in the most cost-effective way. Of course, there are design experts, there are ethicists, this is my organization, there are IT experts, there are sorry. Oh, I'm not doing very well here. Human factor experts from DLR and other organizations, local organizations in Bologna, in Cagliari, in Lisbon, and in Zagreb. We're working with transport authorities, transport operators, the municipality, our partners, and we have developed 7 disability-led working groups in all these 7 cities. And everything that I will present to you, from the design of the protocols, the interviews, the surveys, the MDI, the gonna list, everything is designed with disabled people, conducted by disabled people, and analyzed by disabled people, and now implemented by disabled people. The project had 2 objectives. One is to create a methodology and approach that allows them, that invites them, allows them, enables them, and builds their confidence to lead the innovation process. Open innovation has been around for a while, but there are no methodologies good enough to enable people with different impairments to take part in the open innovation process. So TRIPS projects develops the methods, the tools, and the approach to enable them to be participants. Actually, not to be just participants, to lead the innovation. And right now, we are using that approach to develop case studies that can showcase to us, to them, and to the sector that this approach can work and can work better than the previous approaches in terms of designing and implementing inclusive urban transport. Because frankly, so far, we have failed. There's a lot of background before we do this, so of course you have to start by understanding the problem. Okay, so we did some reading, of course, and we did some qualitative interviews. Actually, we didn't. Disabled people did the qualitative interviews. So we had blind people interviewing other blind people, but also people on wheelchairs in their cities about what are the pain points of transport in their cities. And we had this idea that we're also going to do shadowing, but COVID hit hard, so we could not do shadowing, but they did social media analysis of different groups, and what people thought about the transport in their cities. Based on this qualitative research, we together did the analysis and designed a protocol, for a survey, online survey. COVID couldn't do it otherwise. So we designed these online surveys. We translated it in 13 European countries. And we had decent, but I would rather say small, not too small, not too big sample from 21 European countries. Disabled people gave us their opinion about not so much we weren't today's transport systems, but tomorrow's transport systems. And this is what the main points that we found. Accessibility for them is an end-to-end journey issue, and we try to solve it mode by mode. That will not help them. It doesn't matter if we have like accessible buses and accessible trains if the intersection between the trains and the buses is not accessible. We have to see and view the problem holistically as an end-to-end issue. An accessible journey planner is something that would benefit all disabled users, irrespective of the type of disability that they have, and in all countries and in all ages, because it will give them the certainty that when they leave their house to go to a place, they can actually reach their destination. And there is no some gap on the journey. Otherwise, they will choose not to travel. The cycling infrastructure the way it is designed at the moment is the least, like they don't know what we even do this. Blind people cannot use it, of course. Even deaf people are scared to use it because they cannot hear people coming from the back. So it's very scary, a very scary place for them. People on wheelchairs actually piggyback the cycle lanes because it's easiest for them to ride a cycle lane as opposed to some of the pavements in some of the cities, like Athens. So they're open to use them if we manage to make them accessible. So in the current state, it is not. If we redesign them, it could be a nice place for them to use. Autonomous vehicles and on-demand transport, they are welcoming that. They say, make it accessible for us so we can use it. And we are open to anything that will help us go run an independent life, make it affordable for us. Like, what am I supposed to do with my wheelchair when I board that autonomous vehicle? Who is going to put it in the trunk when there is no driver, right? Will I be able to board with my wheelchair? If I'm blind, how will I communicate with the interface to tell it where I'm going? And how will I have the certainty that I am heading in the right direction and that machine is not taking me somewhere else? How do I feel insecure? And when it comes to on-demand transport, especially with ride sharing, especially disabled women are harassed. They are vulnerable and they are harassed in public transport. So they're saying, okay, when? So they rely on staff to come to their help if there is an incident. So they're saying, can we, in the ride-sharing services that are not, there's not a driver, there is not some staff, how can you guarantee my physical safety? So they're not against them, we just have to think about their concerns. We also looked at smart technologies because the idea was, well, maybe some of these personal technologies can help the sector bridge some of the gaps without heavy investments in the transport infrastructure. So, for example, having assisting robots helping some of these people navigate through busy intersections in busy large stations. Will they be open to get assistance from assistive robots? And the answer is yes. Just give us anything that we can use, assuming that a wearable has an accessible interface, AR glasses that give us information about the world. We can get that information in accessible way. So if I'm blind, I need to listen, and if I'm deaf, I need to see it somehow. And yeah, give me any assistive robot that can, instead of me relying on other people, that sometimes they're not available, and I can be more independent. So they're open to them, assuming that we can afford it. We have the digital skills to use it, and the interfaces are catered for our individual needs. But the most hurtful of all the things that they are facing today, and they want this for tomorrow, is our attitudes, the attitudes of the drivers and the attitudes of other passengers. So they feel second-class citizens, and that's literally within our power today to change. We have done so many public campaigns, for example, for the seat belts or don't drink and drive. Why not having public campaigns to sort our attitudes towards them? The other thing that we did together is to measure accessibility, not accessibility the way some measure it, like the distance from the average distance from any house in the vicinity to the closer bus stop or train stop, because that does not mean anything for people with disabilities. Because maybe the stop is very nearby, but then I'm on a wheelchair and there are steps along the way. So for me, it could be very far. It doesn't matter because I cannot reach it. So we asked them what accessibility means from their point of view. And what it means and what they want is parity, travel parity in terms of access with everybody else. So they want to spend the same time when they need to go from A to B. Most of them spend 20 to 40 minutes more per journey just because some bus is not taking them because there is no space to put your wheelchair, because it's taken up by prams and mothers, or because it's full, because 1 in every 4 buses come that is accessible. They want to have parity in terms of safety, in terms of traveling on their own without the need of a chaperone all the time, in terms of affordability, and we share common, obviously, targets there, in terms of comfort and convenience. And under all these dimensions, there are factors relating to planning the journey, going to the mode of transport, being on board, and the last mile, from dismantling from the public transport to go to your destination. So if anybody's interested, what lies behind this, do let me know. We now going to recycle some of the spent travel budget, because we had a lot, to create that MDI from a framework into an actual app that they can use in different cities to rate their journeys. And also the app will geolocate them, so we know exactly where the pain points were and what time, and give them the opportunity to take pictures so they can upload these pictures as part of their feedback to create incidents, and give it a number. Correspond these incidents to the dimension. And what you see here is how we think we might visualize the results from the feedback into what we hope to propose to everyone, the development of a European Accessibility Observatory, that all this feedback will be there, will be public, and will allow whoever is responsible for addressing the issue, maybe the mayor's office, maybe some transport operator, to make a pledge on how to respond to this. And I call on my sister projects and everyone else who would like to heed us towards making this a reality. Because one of the complaints in the survey was that we complain to transport operators, it goes into some customer feedback database, and we hear nothing back. So we're going to make this transparent. That's what we want to do. Make it part of the tick boxing exercise. So, okay, as I said, one of the things that we're doing is to provide the approach. So we develop an approach of engage them in open innovation, yes. And we're now testing it for developing case studies in the cities, and we will translate this into a MOOC in online training So everybody who wants to get involved in this can actually do it for themselves. We are creating 6 prototypes. We are creating prototypes in all 7 cities, mostly related to travel planning, but also some other measures like accessible bus stops. Again, if you are in any of the cities and you want to be involved in the process, do let me know. And what we're working towards in this year is also the co-signing of an accessibility memorandum of understanding between disabled NGOs, the transport sector with the help of UITP, and hopefully municipalities to prioritize the investment portfolio, to agree an investment portfolio and sign and commit to its establishment. And we want to also propose 3 other things. One is the European Accessibility Observatory, which is the metrics, but also a European Accessibility Design Center, because we realize that transport operators do not have the internal expertise to deal with accessibility. So we want to create that center that can then act as consultants and facilitators of the process for any accessibility project they would like to take on. And we want, of course, to involve persons with disabilities in standards development when it comes to vehicles, when it comes to transport infrastructure, to urban planning and public procurement, and make that accessibility part of the exercise. And I won't bother you more than that, because if these are our short to medium term goals, the long-term goals is to expand these proposals into other areas and make it part of the business as usual. And I'm sorry, I get passionate. I took a little bit more of your time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, now we'll move to the question and answer round. So I'll be handing over to Ingrid. If our 3 speakers could join us on the stage for this.
Yes, thanks a lot, speakers, for extremely interesting 3 presentations on this important topic. And I think we have received very good, highly relevant aspects on inclusion in the transport system. I will not spend a lot of time on wrapping this up, because I think it is more important that you get the opportunity to discuss. But let me just say that I think what is common here is the to center this around users and people and non-users. It's really the people aspect. And I think what is nice also is that you have you all have pilots where you try to pilot things not only with the person who is going on a journey, but also on the stakeholders, those that will use toolkits, because that is a fear I personally have sometimes, that who is asking for a toolkit? You know, we do a lot of toolkits, but what is the market for that? So I think that is really good, this co-development. And we see also the importance of the human contacts in all phases. Even if we get all automated, we will have to rely on human contacts. And I think this morning has actually given first mile, last mile some kind of new meaning to me. I thought that was a bit academic before, but I really get the point that it is highly important to get from your starting point to the destination. So I think both Indimo, Dignity and TRIPS has given us a good overview, and I hope you have a lot of questions for our panelists. If not, I will I will have, but I think I'll leave it up to this audience to who would like to start. Yes, go ahead. And please tell who you are before stating your question.
Okay. I am Jacqueline Flock. I am senior scientist at SINTEF in Trondheim in Norway. I am working with digital inclusion, that is developing digital solution to help people, to include people in different processes, in health, in democracy in different areas. And this has bring me, of course, to the topic of digital exclusion, because when we design a solution, we meet a lot of people who have very bad, low digital skill, I would say. Actually, the number in Europe is, I have read, 169 million of people who lack basic digital skills. So it's a lot. It's above 1/3 of the population. In Norway, where I'm living, Vesthammer in the town I'm living, they changed the system for the bus, and before we can use a card, to pay. And Vesthammer, everything has gone digital, and people have to have a smartphone to be able to get on the bus. So it's not only transport, but it's in all areas. So I have also been working a lot with people who do training. In Norway, we have a lot of training to try to increase the digital skills. And the libraries, for example, they have got the responsibility now to train people. And there are a lot of also voluntary associations. And what I learned from that, it's very interesting too, because it's very difficult for some people to learn. It's difficult to design for people who have low skill. It's very difficult for people to teach them how to use a digital system. And so I have some kind. And also we see that people sometimes they learn and then they come back a few weeks after because they have forgotten what they have learned. And I think there is a reason for that, is that, I'm speaking a lot, sorry, is that we use an instrumental approach to learning. That is, we say people, you have to do that, you have to do that, you have to do that, instead of using a relational approach where we maybe explain people what is happening when I do that. So this is a field I would like to explore if some people here are interested to focus more on that kind of training. Not only you have made, I don't remember your name, I'm sorry, have mentioned training in your project, the first project that was presented. I would like to know what kind of approach you are using and what are actually the results you get. And maybe in the other project you have some training approach, so I am interested to hear about it.
Okay, let's hear what, I guess we start with Imre and then...
Thank you very much for the question, and the issue that we are raising, it's very relevant, and I think we need an approach where we use actually both ways. So not designing very complex digital solutions and trying to train people to use those complex solutions, but rather than that, designing universally accessible solutions, interfaces and applications which take into account already in the design phase the needs and requirements and the abilities of all sorts of vulnerable people. And then when we have boiled down this application not to be too complex but simple enough, but of course we cannot say that we will stop digital innovation because it seems that's the future, and then bring the vulnerable people and the potential users to familiarize themselves with this application. And indeed, I agree with you that this shouldn't be a process when we kind of force them to take a training and learn something by heart, but it needs to be really a gentle process. And indeed, it takes time. Our approach is that it needs to be several occasions when these people needs to be accompanied to go, for example, to this smart delivery box and to explore what they can do. But what is also important that this process needs to be meaningful. So they need to understand, why do I need to learn this? Do I really want to receive a package, for example? Because if not, then there is no point in training as well.
Would Dignity, for example, want to comment on this as well?
Sorry. Yeah, thank you for the question. We are not yet at the stage of training, but which is very important. All pilots say that is this personal, but also called this offline support that needs to be there. If it's a training or a personal coach or a a point, a help desk somewhere where people can go. We cannot scratch that. I mean, we cannot delete that from our system. And we are doing that. So that's one point I wanted to make, that all kind of services of deliveries have to be aware that this personal contact should be somewhere and that it should be a free help desk. I mean, a paid call is then not an option. So that's one thing. The other thing about trainings, we do that as Mobile 21 for other topics, not on this digital skill at this moment, but it has to be an active-oriented training, I think, not this like I'm the teacher and I will teach you something. That's what I recognize in your question, if I'm right, but really go on the street with a purpose. Like Imre said, you want to go to your work, okay, let's help you. How could we do this? And if people implement a kind of habit in a very needed journey, they can extend it to other journeys as well, we think.
Tali, is there anything to add from trips?
Well, we haven't used training for the solutions we are developing. What we needed to train people on how to use all these digital platforms, and yeah, disabled citizens also, they are not very well dispersed. So you do it literally by solving the problems, not by training them, but saying, what has been your problem, linking in, using, let me answer your questions. It's as simple as that. So, yeah.
Sure.
If I may add just one more thing, in our Madrid pilot, actually, we are training the bicycle couriers who are delivering healthy food to vulnerable people, how they should behave with people with different kind of impairments, with mental disabilities or physically disabled people, or people who haven't seen anyone for the last 2 weeks. And this was really an important issue during COVID, because a courier who comes to visit you and brings you food was actually the human contact as well.
Thank you. Further questions? Yes, please. Go ahead. You first.
Hello, Uros Salobir from Elis. I come from energy business, power company, and I'm just trying to look into this knowledge from the point of bringing the mobility closer to energy issues, which, Jacqueline, it's good that you're here also today, which will be a huge challenge also, because when we move into green transport, of course, we have to think that the charging will change. And I wonder how much did you enter this field from your projects as well? Because it seems that it is a particular problem, because if we want that people will really charge their cars sustainable, to reduce the CO2 and also to get the cheapest price of charging in the future, which is our common goal. This is something which needs to be also tackled from the special group's point of view. So my company tried to do this through anthropological ways, so to sit with people, to understand what they can do, what they cannot do. But maybe you manage this, or you can extend this, or you see some potential that we can also extend these studies, not only for the mobility part, but also for this connection between the mobility and the energy part, which will be so important in the future.
Any comments on that? It's, thanks for your comment. I think this is an interesting twist. We sort of home in on automation normally, but I think this is excellent question, actually.
Okay, we didn't look in the case study of, charging your electric car if you are a disabled person, right? We didn't look into the aspect of how you're going to deal with the charging, going to the battery, plugging it in, taking it off. That was not a case study, but we can easily do a case study easily. Nothing is easy, but we could extend of this aspect of interaction with a private car. That is also, We did study autonomous vehicles, so the idea of a robot taxi, but I have to admit the emphasis was not whether the engine of the robot taxi was electric or non-electric. It was about being manned or not manned as a vehicle. But yeah, I would be happy to extend a case study if you're interested and work with you.
Would you also want to comment?
Yeah, we also are not addressing this issue in the project because we are dealing more with personal mobility solutions and deliveries. But I think it's a very relevant question because if we look at the deployment of electric vehicles and charging points, this is not at all equitable because electric vehicles are still much more expensive than normal vehicles. So eventually what we see is that it's more affluent and well-educated people who are actually buying these vehicles, which also kind of reflects in the market because the developers of these vehicles also target well-educated and well-off people mostly. And most of these vehicles already have a very complex interface, and also charging infrastructure usually works with an app to find a charging point or even use the charging point. So there is certainly an equity issue. If, for example, in Brussels by 2035, all diesel and fuel cars will be banned. So we should expect that everybody will be riding around with electric vehicles, but do we have also the digital infrastructure for that, which is accessible?
I just wanted to add that mobility poverty is, first of all, also a question of financing your mobility options. And with the groups we are working with, a car is out of sight. A normal one and an electrical one. I mean, this is not the groups we are working right now. So the step to see if these digital interfaces would be accessible for them is really far from what they're struggling with today. And so our focus was really on the options that are here now, that are more accessible in terms of finance too, even though it's sometimes already too expensive to get a train or a shared bike. So we did not enter into this topic from that regard.
Okay, we will. I think we have to bear this in mind when we discuss future work programs. So that's thanks for bringing it up. And there was one more question here, and I think that will be the last one, unfortunately, because there is coffee break, which you probably would like to enjoy as well.
Great.
So
Okay,
let's
I'll
do
keep
one
it
more.
short. My name is Josh Kukulski. I work at Toyota Motor Europe, basically in automation, autonomous shuttles like the e-pallet, and I believe that, well, it's in Toyota core values for mobility for all and for safe transport for everyone, and really to be inclusive. I think for these automated systems, the business case is to take out the safety steward. Of course, there's no driver there. And so I think there will be a need for in-cabin monitoring. And the question is, how do we do this and how do we make it inclusive for all? So there's the HMI part that was discussed today. There's also the way that we monitor using different sensors and picking up on kind of different scenarios. So for example, right now we're looking at fighting, bag snatching, and so on. But when training these models, we need good data. And we found that even for passengers falling, people who have real mobility impairments, they don't fall in the same way that someone else would fall. So building these data sets to train the models is difficult. So I'm just wondering, in terms of data, maybe we can have a discussion after for anybody who is relating to this. But if you have any, I guess, the requirements from these different user groups on what they need in a autonomous shuttle like this, I would be happy to discuss.
Okay, so we haven't covered the aspect of disabled citizens being passengers on autonomous buses or bystanders of autonomous buses, but I've been putting a proposal outside of TRIPS as a next TRIPS looking at these issues, because you're quite right. How do you secure yourself within an autonomous bus? It's not only people on wheelchairs, but other people have like upper limb weaknesses. So also there are no biofidelic models when it comes to people with disabilities. There aren't, either virtual or real. So that's kind of lacking as well. There are not even statistics of how many with current transport system, how many disabled citizens are hit by buses or cars. There's no data from the industry, from the insurance industry. So you're quite right, there's a big gap. We don't have databases. We don't have training databases that represent disabled citizens, not even with the current transport systems. And I think this is a big gap, and one of the third priority to create these databases. Otherwise, we're going to have AI that is biased. So call me. Honestly, this is a very big issue that we need to address now, because we are developing systems that will leave them behind once again.
I could add to that as well. I'm involved in a project with the shuttle buses in Linköping in Sweden. These very slow buses, and when you make the safety case to get approval for running these types of shuttles on public roads, you have to demonstrate that you are not running into anything. That you brake for seagulls or bikes or whatever you have, but then that is on the expense of the interior safety. So we have actually, because you have the not only disabled people, you have people who are not disabled, or the safety driver for that matter, who is with us for the foreseeable future. They are standing up, and they are at risk if you have these very abrupt braking. So there is a balance between interior and exterior safety that is normally lost in the when you make the safety case to get your permission to run this. So if anybody could help us get this balance a bit addressed, that would be super good.
Thank you.
But even the algorithms that, but even the algorithms that kind of assume certain behaviors from citizens, how long it will take you to respond to an incoming car, it's not, disabled people do not have the same response rate because they didn't hear it coming, or because they didn't see it coming, or because simply they cannot walk fast enough or wheel themselves fast enough to safety. So many talk. Let's talk.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, we have to continue the debate outside the session because we're short of time now. And thanks so much, panelists and audience. And I leave it to the chair of the session to close this.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you to all our speakers. We'll be closing our session here today. You have now a coffee break. The next sessions will be starting at 11 a.m., 11 o'clock. So after the break, you'll have sessions on sharing the space and the service, new mobility patterns, and also a green vehicle session on architecture, components, and systems for electrified vehicles. Please also visit the exhibition area. There you find different stands, including also the stand from the European Commission and from CINEA, where you can also find more information about projects and also our various opportunities and activities on projects. So thanks again everyone from our speakers, and thank you as audience. Have a good day. Bye.